Tires are hot. Hey guys, good afternoon guys. Alright guys, alright guys, alright guys, alright guys, alright guys. Alright ladies and gentlemen. Alright guys, alright guys. Okay guys. Alright guys, alright guys, alright guys, alright guys, alright guys, alright guys, alright guys. Alright guys. Alright ladies and gentlemen. Alright guys. Alright guys. Alright guys. Alright guys. Alright guys. Wow guys. Alright guys. Alright guys. Alright guys, today we're going to go over our saga to attempt to make 1,000 wheel horsepower with a Vortec 4200. Now, as you guys have seen in the past, we made 824 wheel horsepower with a stock bottom end Vortec 4200. And we have pretty much settled on that being about as hard as we are willing to push a stock bottom end. So the engine that you see here is a forged rod and piston engine that you saw us build in a previous video. It features some Molnar connecting rods and some Wiseco dished pistons. It also has the Faster Proms ported cylinder head, some Schneider Racing reground camshafts, Crowler valve springs, and it also has a Artec exhaust manifold, a Precision 7675 turbo, and an Artec intake manifold. And all of this is stuffed into my 1981 Ford Fairmont station wagon, which you can see right here. Now, the reason that I am calling this a saga is because this has taken nearly a year to get to this point. We actually tried to break 1,000 wheel horsepower way back in February earlier this year. So, without further ado, let's go to that. For the first pull, 443 horsepower is about what I would have expected. However, the back pressure was already above 1 to 1, and that wasn't looking very good for our 1,000 wheel horsepower goals. That being said, I have seen back pressure reduce as you increase the boost and get into the sweet spot of the compressor. So, let's crank some boost to it. Well, that's not good. Exhaust back pressure continued to rise, and we were seeing an even greater drive pressure ratio, and it was not looking good for our 1,000 wheel horsepower goals. From here, it was pretty much down to, let's see what we can get out of this turbo. We got a race to get to. Things continued to look worse as exhaust pressure continued to rise and our drive ratio got even worse. That being said, it's a lot less than what we've run in the past, so let's see if it'll take more boost. So needless to say, that didn't go quite as we were expecting. The turbo that Precision supplied to us was a little bit off on the compressor and turbine sizing, and as you could see, we increased the boost by 2 psi there at the end, and it picked up very minimal horsepower. The back pressure was starting to skyrocket, and it was clear that the turbo was just not happy. After that dyno session, we took the car to Sick Week 2023, and unfortunately during that event, as you guys are probably painfully aware of, we had a little bit of a setback. Now, besides the elephant in the room being my dad's wreck, we also had a lot of other issues with this car, mainly being the transmission. We chronicled that little adventure in another video I will link above. I still don't think we are 100% past that, but we at least have a transmission in the car that is capable of holding horsepower. We talked to Precision Turbo right after the first dyno session, and they recommended that we send back the turbo and get another one that is slightly larger than the first one that they sent. So we did that. The turbo, which is the turbo that is on the car currently, is a 7675. Now some of you might be saying, I thought you said it originally had a 7675. Well, that's true. This, however, is a Sportsman frame 7675. It has a larger exducer on the compressor and a larger inducer on the turbine, along with a much larger turbine housing. So it should be able to compress the air much more efficiently and allow for more turbine flow. So just before PRI this year, we decided to go back to the dyno and then try to break that 1,000 wheel horsepower mark to sort of create a little bit of media buzz. So let's go to that. Well, the drive ratio looked a lot more favorable on this turbo, but we noticed something a little bit concerning in the data. The injector duty cycle was already at 67%, and if we wanted to make 1,000 wheel horsepower, we were going to need a lot more than that. You may have noticed some smoke during the pull. That turned out to be the vent line of the transmission puking onto the downpipe, and we chased our tail on that for a little bit, and we didn't end up finding that until after this dyno session. Unfortunately, that session didn't go well either. we quickly found that we were not going to have enough fuel injector to be able to break that 1,000 wheel horsepower mark. And something that I did just before the dyno session was I changed out the injectors to another set of 1500cc injectors that was actually on the Volvo. The reason that I did this was because we've been running those 1500s for quite a while, and the ones that were in the Volvo were a much more fresh set, and I was just sort of hoping to just put a newer set into it in order to, eliminate any potential issues. And unfortunately, I created more issues as those 1500cc injectors. They must have had a little bit less flow or something of that sort. Frankly, I should have been aware that the old set of 1500s probably weren't going to accomplish the goal either, and I should have looked at what we now have on the car, which is 12 injectors. So we went to PRI with our tail between our legs, but we had a little bit of a surprise. Vortec Performance decided to send us home with their newly developed cast aluminum intake manifold for the Vortec 4200. So I went to work on making that manifold fit this car, and I added some injector bungs to it as well in order to be able to meet the fuel demand needs of this engine. This was sort of a convenient excuse to sort of rework the intake manifold solution, so I went to work. If you guys watched the most recent video, you will have seen that whole process, and it is now on the car and working. So we went back on Christmas Eve one last time to try to break that infamous 4-digit mark. So let's see what happened. So we continued to raise the boost, and we kept seeing it make more power as well as exhaust back pressure. I had already sprung the wastegate to the maximum that you can get into the diaphragm, and I wanted more boost. So I did the only logical thing, and I disconnected the bottom of the wastegate. Alright, it's time to party. Thank God for boost cut. That could have been really, really bad. So we backed it off a couple percentage on the boost controller, and we gave it another go. Now we had the boost under control, but we were starting to have traction issues. It took us a few pulls to dial that in, and we once again threw 43 pounds of boost at it. So we had a lot of good things and bad things that came out of that session. So let's start with the good things. The good things are I have way more confidence in this engine. Overall, I think the engine did a fantastic job. I have no reason to believe that this engine cannot be pushed a whole lot harder. Frankly, the fact that it held 43 pounds of boost multiple times with no signs of coolant pressure is pretty impressive. I would say that everything forward of the bell housing face is doing a fantastic job, with the exception of possibly the turbo. We didn't see any signs of elevated coolant pressure. The oil pressure was fantastic every time. We had ample fuel pressure. The ignition seemed to be very solid. EGTs were very even, and the intercooler was seeing a good temperature drop across it. We did not see elevated manifold temperatures. Now, let's get to the bad. We did not break 1,000 wheel horsepower, and I'm a little bit disappointed by that. I'm very happy with how this combo is doing overall, and frankly, it has met my goals. That being said, it did not accomplish the 1,000 wheel horsepower that I think needs to be done to get these engines onto the map. I think it made more power than what we were able to measure. The car made a 800 wheel horsepower pull, and the tires were gripped up onto the dyno roll, but then we turned up the power and it started to spin the tires. What this clearly tells me is that it was making more horsepower than 800 wheel horsepower. We just weren't able to measure it. On subsequent pulls, I think we were able to get it strapped down to the roller hard enough that it gripped up, but it still wasn't making the power. And I think there are two possible causes for that phenomenon. One, I think that we need to go back to the very start of the session. The transmission only had third gear for the first couple pulls. What that tells me is the transmission is not happy. So there could be some issues there that are causing it to not be very efficient with the power going to the rear end. Frankly, we're probably going to have to pull the transmission on this car for like the 7th time and investigate that issue. The other possible cause is maybe the turbo is not quite as efficient as I expected. On the last couple pulls, we saw the compressor outlet temp really starting to rise, but it wasn't too crazy excessive. Also, we saw the exhaust back pressure in relation to the boost starting to rise to a less comfortable zone as well, but it really isn't that much higher than what we've done in the past on other combos. So I'm not really ready to conclude that the turbo is not going to make that 1,000 wheel horsepower. And as I mentioned earlier, this has accomplished my goals. I only need 850 wheel horsepower, and my guess is that on the pull where it was spinning the tires on the dyno roll, it was making around 900 wheel horsepower. Obviously, this is not a measured amount. This is sort of the seat of the pants dyno. And I really only need 850 wheel horsepower in order to accomplish the ET goals that I have with the car. So we're at sort of a impasse with what to do from here forward. Why do you think it didn't make the horsepower? Do you have any suggestions for how I could have done anything differently? Let me know down below. With that, I want to end this video off here. I want to say a Happy New Year to everybody out there. It's been a pretty awesome 5 years, and I want to thank everybody for following along. I'm looking forward to 2024. All right, see you guys.